when I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
Jameson Williams has been so impressive these last couple of weeks.
What's up? Cover One at Universe. We are back at it again on the Cover One NFL Draft Show. As always, I am one of your two hosts, Rich Haynes, also known as Burn River Sports on Twitter. And I'm with my good friend, Russell Brown at Russ NFL Draft on Twitter. And, we're back at it again, week 9 of the NFL Draft Weekly Show as we're getting down to the nitty-gritty, a couple weeks away from the big dance, as you will, to really kick off, the NFL summertime and start talking about training camps and rosters get set and all that good stuff. So, excited to be with you again, Russell. We're going to get into some fun topics, I think, here tonight. But, I know this week was a big week for you. You're able to drop your draft guide earlier this week, which was fantastic. Great read. But, talk about your week. Talk about dropping that draft guide for a minute.
It's been nonstop. Go. It's been a pretty busy week for me. It's been quite so busy. I'm having a coffee at 7:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But no, it's been awesome, man. I've had a lot of support, a lot of people showing a lot of love. It's got to be, I think it's close to 1,400, 1,500 downloads, which I think is relatively good, even though it is free. So that obviously helps. But it's been awesome. It's been a 10-month process. That's kind of how the guide works for me. End of June, after I kind of take a little bit of time away from just football and the internet and just kind of relax and decompress. I get back into it, watch a little NFL stuff, kind of see what some of my favorite fits are from the draft. And then obviously I start kind of prepping for the next year, and that's looking at senior guys and stuff like that. And that's kind of what I did with this year. I wanted to have 150 players fully graded, and fully graded for me is basically 3 to 4 games or more. Most players, I think almost all, I would say probably 95% of the guys on my board at the top 125, they were graded on 4 games or more. There was a couple that I only had 3, but then I have 40 players or so with notes, where I was only able to maybe watch 1 or 2 games. But the thing was, I wanted to get to 150 guys fully graded, and I only got to 125 because obviously my son playing football in the fall kind of at times puts me back. But then I had COVID right around Thanksgiving, and for 2.5 weeks I was kind of out of commission. I did get a lot of offensive linemen taken care of that time, but I was also just very much kind of out of it. So I fell behind, but the guide came together pretty well. I changed the format from previous years. It's definitely a lot more in detail, which is what I've been wanting to do. And I finally found something that I really liked, and I kind of just went with it. And all the graphics are made by me. Everything on there is written by me. Everything ranked is by me. Next year, I've already got more ideas of how to make it. That beats my 0 players. Don't sell yourself short.
It's okay, but yeah, Jason, me and you, buddy, 0 players. Jason, it's okay.
But yeah, I mean, it's been awesome, man. I've had so many people reaching out. It's been awesome. A lot of people have been sharing it that I didn't expect to share it, so I appreciate it. And like I've said time and time again, people always reach out and they say, hey, let me give you $5-10 for the guide. What's your Venmo? What's your PayPal? I appreciate that. But don't give it to me. Go give it to charity. There's 3 charities linked in there. If you don't agree with any of those charities, that's fine. Find one and just throw them $5-10 and it's for my draft guide. I don't care. Do whatever you need to do. Give it to people in need. Don't give it to me. I think, it's so much more important than that. So no, it's awesome. I could ramble on and on about it. I know we're going to be diving into some of it. So yeah, it's awesome. If you want it, it's on cover1.net or it's pinned on my Twitter at Russ NFL Draft.
Yeah, definitely go check it out. I downloaded it earlier this week. Like I said, I haven't gotten all the way through it, but I've gotten through about 80. I think some players read your recaps. I read your rankings on about 80 players right now. So yeah, definitely go check that out. That's a great accomplishment for you. And again, I think it's for those of you that haven't, maybe followed Russell a ton yet. He has some different opinions, and I'm going to get into those, a couple of those difference of opinions compared to maybe some more consensus rankings, which I kind of pulled out, which I like. I think it's, difference of opinions are a good thing, because obviously if you think about it, if you watch the draft year after year, you get, the big draft, experts put out their rankings too. And a lot of times it's not what happens right in the NFL draft. All of a sudden you get a team that evaluates a player, much differently than the media does, or the draft scouts. So I think it's pretty cool. But before we dive into that, so if you are joining us tonight, we are going to dive into round 2 targets. We'll maybe do a little bit of round 1 stuff, but I know this week for me, I got to shout out my Guardians. I know it's baseball, it's not football, but heading to the home opener here tomorrow. Big, really excited to get downtown to watch that, and the Cavs home playoff game, home play-in playoff game against the Hawks. So I'm pumped to kind of take a half day afternoon and go get lost in some sports and some beverages in downtown.
Get lost in the sauce, baby.
Lost in the sauce. So yeah, last week I didn't have any sauce with me. This week I got a little sauce with me. So excited for the weekend, and happy Easter for everybody that does celebrate that. That's coming up here on Sunday as well. But we are going to jump in to kind of round 2 targets, and we're not going to necessarily do a mock, but we are going to kind of look at, I'm going to ask you some opinions on different teams and where they might target, from a round 2 perspective. Again, I have some players in mind that I want to get your opinion on that, might be round 2 targets. But, we do have a question from Scott up here about round 1. So it looks like he may have missed some of our previous shows about round 1 IDs. And I'm assuming this is, in regards to the Bills, since his next comment was he hopes it's Booth. So just make that assumption there that it's about the Bills pick. And, we've gone back and forth. We've gone, with this again, this is our 9th week. We've talked a ton about the first round. So Scott, go ahead and check out some of those other episodes. But, we've had Anthony Prohaska on as well. And, I think McBride's kind of, slotted into that 25th pick a couple different times in mock drafts. I think we've, initially, I know Russell was interested in adding a weapon at wide receiver for Josh Allen. I think we've kind of pivoted a little bit from that, and it's been more cornerback talk of late. I think Jameson Williams was initially kind of what we were thinking potentially for the Bills there, but a lot of cornerback talk at 25. And not to burst your bubble there, Scott, but Russell isn't as big on Booth as some other folks, and maybe just 30 seconds, give a 30-second synopsis as to why maybe you don't love Booth as much as maybe some other folks at the cornerback position.
Yeah, I mean, I still like the player, 34th on the board. I like some of his physicality and how he plays the game, but just some of the key things that I've paid attention to is this whole pre-draft process. If people are going to knock my boy Nakobe Dean for not running and not testing, well, we got to start knocking, Andrew Booth a little bit, coming up with a quad injury, some lower body ailment issues. That's a concern, especially when you play that skilled position on the defense. So when you're a defensive back, those injuries can reoccur just like they do for a wide receiver, a running back, stuff like that. So I'm always worried there when I look at that, but also with Booth, I thought there were times that he was really late sometimes in and out of his breaks. I thought at times he kind of got tripped up on his feet. Now, again, he's got some really acrobatic catches on tape. He at times it feels like he's floating in midair and makes some very impressive one-handed grabs. But I think he is somebody that is very much the possibility of being a first-round pick, because somebody in that 20 range could certainly use him. I think of a team like New England at 21. I could see them falling in love with him. I could see Dallas as well. If a run on some of the players that they really like are gone, I could see them trying to pair him up with Trayvon Diggs and trying to make that defense in that secondary a little bit better. Buffalo makes sense too. And really, I mean, it is truly just fractions of points that get him away from being a first rounder for me. I mean, we're not fractions of a point, but we're talking 3, 4, 5 points. So a point scale, does it really matter when you're sitting there at 38 on the board, or 34th on the board? I mean, you're basically talking 2 spots away from that first round if you talk about 32 picks in round 1. So, I like him. It just wouldn't surprise me if he was somebody that we talk about on Friday afternoon all day as somebody that would make sense for Jacksonville with the first pick, the Lions at 35 or 34, the Jets at 35. And I think the Jets are very intriguing at 35 if he ends up falling there. So, I know we said 30 seconds, but I can't go 30 seconds. Sorry, honey. And it's just one of those things. So,
Yeah, hey, and just want to recap that, and keep the questions coming in chat. What we're going to do, we're going to talk about round two prospects. We're just going to grab your questions and your comments at the same time. So I'm just going to go to another one here. Tommy keeps talking about Mr. Pickens, who I really like at wide receiver. Again, I'm not sure if you're thinking that maybe for the Bills potentially in round two if they grab a cornerback in round one. I don't know that he'll be there in round two in the Bills pick. I would be really happy if he was there for the Browns, to be honest, who is my team at 44. I think Pickens is kind of a round two target though. So what are your thoughts on Pickens? Where do you think he may end up landing?
Well, I mean, I think there's an outside chance that we could see him on the back end of the first round, primarily, Green Bay at 28, Detroit at 32. I think he would make a lot of sense there. He's 47th on my board, very long, very athletic. You see a 6'3", 195 receiver that can run vertically down the field, but also he is somebody that has this acrobatic ability to come down with some really difficult catches. And I think that's just what makes him so intriguing is if he played, a full season of without the torn ACL, I think we would be talking about him as probably a lock in the first round. So yeah, realistically, I don't see him being there for the Bills. I don't care what mock draft simulator you're looking at. I just don't see it happening. I think, top 45 pick is probably likely for him. And if he's not there in round one, or if he's still available after round one, the Jets pick at 35 and 38. Jacksonville, even though they've spent a bunch of money, they would make a lot of sense. And I'm just going to pull up the draft order real quick for the second round. Again, I mentioned Detroit at 32. If they pass there, I could see them again going at 34 and taking them. Houston at 37, Chicago at 39. They have to get some receiver help for Justin Fields. I think that might be maybe his best landing spot when I talk about all these teams, because I do like Fields a lot, and I think 39 makes a ton of sense. So I think Pickens, top 40, top 45 pick. I would be stunned if he was outside of that. I don't know what his draft position is on DraftKings, what that prop bet is at, but if it's at 45, I'm taking the under.
All right. No, I agree. I don't think he's going to be there for my Brownies at 44. I would love for them to add a wide receiver at 44, whether it's, Christian Watson, whether it's Pickens. But yeah, I agree. I don't think that's going to be a situation that they'll be able to get out of 44.
Yeah, and just real quick to add to that, I know we got some more stuff to obviously get into, but with Pickens, the only thing I think that maybe drops him off the board for some teams is if there's any structural damage to his knee whatsoever. I have not heard that, but I'm not as well connected as other people, but also these teams, they have different doctors looking at these players. So certain teams will have him in different spots. So even though I have him as kind of a top 50 player, some teams might not. But again, I have a hard time believing that he won't be a top 45 pick.
Yeah, we got a couple other questions around running backs or comments on running backs. So I'm going to grab a couple of them. We got our boy, Y up here saying, hoping for a great running back in round two. Again, assuming from a Bills perspective. And then Pops Mafia, love you, Pops. Shout out, Pops. Thanks for always listening and being a part of the Cover One family. Any chance one of the top three running backs falls to round three? So that would be Mr. Hall, Kenneth Walker, Isaiah Spiller, I would assume. Maybe Rashad White. I guess I don't know. Spiller or Rashad White, depending on your opinion. My opinion would be the third running back. So the Bills obviously pick lower in round two. So this kind of can be the same question. Do you think any of those guys fall to the top of round three, which obviously means that they would be available for the Bills, at their round two slot?
Yeah, I mean, I don't personally see Breece Hall falling. I don't see Kenneth Walker falling. I personally don't know if either one of them are going to be there at 57 for the Bills in the second round, if I'm being completely honest. Isaiah Spiller might be the one that gets in the mix. He, again, all three of these guys could be top 55 picks. Like when you look at the second round in general, depending on what the Jets want to do, I keep mentioning them, but they have the draft capital. You look at Seattle at 40 and 41. If there's any issues with Chris Carson and his injury history, I know Rashad Penny came on late, and I know they gave him another contract, but if there's any issues there, I know Chicago has David Montgomery, but are they looking maybe for a complement there? They have picks 39 and 48. Washington has done a ton of research. I know that they've done a ton of research on all three of these players. So there's a very strong chance that they could take one of them at 47. Kansas City at 50, that's a wild card, right? Philadelphia at 51, I also think is a wild card. Arizona even at 55. I think that there's some really strong wild card type teams that could be looking in the market for another running back or just upgrading the position in general. And also, again, Houston at 37. So I think these teams are definitely going to do their research. And I threw enough teams there. So I think all three of them could be gone. And if one of them is available, I think it would be Spiller if it was me, just off the way it's kind of gone. But yeah, Rachaad White, maybe in that third round, that would make a lot of sense. Just by, he's not my highest running back in that spot, but I think he could be there just because you mentioned him already. I certainly think at that back end of the third round, he could be there. James Cook is really interesting, I think, for the third round. I don't think he'll go in the second round. Maybe he does just because of his pass catching ability, but I certainly like him more so in that third round range. I think that's a great landing spot for him. Outside of that, Hassan Haskins is really intriguing to me. He's 95th on my board, my 7th ranked running back. I think he's a 4th round type of player. And, Houston's got multiple picks there. Maybe that's the physical runner that maybe the Bills would be interested in. I don't know. I do like James Cook, though. They're at 89 now that I look at that more and more. So I think there's definitely going to be options. And even though I have him ranked this way, again, it could go in a variety of ways. Another one would be Dameon Pierce as well from Florida. Just really keep tabs on him. I think the league likes him more than maybe Twitter does or even myself. And I still like him.
Yeah, no, and I know, Bill's Mafia this week was interested. I feel a lot Isaiah Spiller talk happened this week, but there was actually an interesting comment that Greg Thompson threw out there, and I want to get your opinion on it. He's doing the TikToks these days. He's getting hip. He's getting hip to the younger generation with the ticking and the talking. But he threw out, from a running back perspective, would you prefer the quickness, and the elusiveness, and maybe not the top end acceleration, but the ability to accelerate quickly, more, get that sudden speed, maybe not have the top end, 40 time, or do you really, do you prefer a guy that has maybe that straight line ability to just kind of hit a hole and go, and maybe does have that kind of top end speed? He posed that question today, on Twitter. I thought it was a good one.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about long speed all the time for these players. I'm more so worried about decisiveness, contact balance, and more so the burst through the hole. If they can get me 4 to 5 yards at a pop, at one point or another, that big run is going to happen. And that's why I like Kenneth Walker so much, because there was 3 instances this season where the first play of the game, he took it 75 yards. And maybe I'm biased because I watch every single one of their games 2 times over, but he's so decisive and his lower body is so fluid and flexible that I truly don't believe it gets talked about enough. And I look at him and I know, when we talk about this question, we look at Breece Hall and some of the home run threat ability, all the touchdowns he scored. He had 41 in his career, and how he's sometimes able to just kind of hit a hole or spin out of something and then hit it and go. And obviously you see the 4.3 speed show up at the combine. You love seeing that stuff, but Kenneth Walker is, I want to say equally as fast, but he's damn near close. I mean, they're pretty damn close. And again, when I look at contact balance, decisiveness, I think Kenneth Walker gets the edge there, because my issue with Hall is just there's times where the decision making is just bad, and he cuts into traffic. You watch him, against Baylor or TCU, he's cutting into the garbage. He's not hitting the hole and bouncing out to the sidewalk and going upfield. He's cutting into the middle of the field and hitting the garbage and getting to the trash and the linebackers. But also when he does get outside, he's using this spin move to do it. Well, a spin move might work in the Big 12 where the defenses aren't as fast, but I don't know if that's going to work in the NFL where everything closes at the snap of a finger. So that's where my issues are with Breece Hall. Now, again, he's got the athletic ability to do it, but does he have the contact balance? Is that decisiveness going to get him in trouble? It could. And that's why I compared him to Miles Sanders, because I thought at times he was a little stiff in the hips. And again, the decisiveness just it worries me. So we'll see. I hope he proves me wrong. I know a lot of people that have him as their top running back, and they're all for him at 25 for Buffalo. If you're cool, that's fine. But I took a very scenic route to that answer for whatever reason. But I have to describe it because I don't want to blow up on the comments when I get called out for something.
Sure. No, yeah. I mean, obviously that's why we're here, right? We're here to get your opinions, your analysis. You've watched more tape than 99.5% of the football fans out there from a tape perspective. Speaking of tape, there was another question out there. I don't know if you actually had the chance to break down tape on Troy Anderson, the linebacker. Did you have any chance to break down Troy?
No, as I was putting the guide together, I was actually able to grab 2 games of all 22. I did watch a game and a half of the broadcast stuff that's on YouTube, which a lot of people do. And it was fine, but it's just not the same, especially when you're trying to watch stuff up in the box. It's sometimes so difficult to do. And he was somebody that I knew about, especially going to the Senior Bowl. I knew of him. I knew about all that stuff, but he was not somebody that was really on my radar to get into the guide, just because, like I said, I was a little bit behind and I wanted to get it out, before really the goal was to get it out before my son's baseball season started kicking up into full gear. And that was really the goal. So that's why I kind of got it out as quickly as I did. But I didn't get to watch him, but I mean, just some details about him without even pulling up the notes. I mean, he's a former quarterback, former running back. He played the offensive side of the football for most of his career. Then he goes and flips over to linebacker, and he does a phenomenal job playing the position. I mean, he reads the backfield like he is a quarterback. He's a tackling machine. He puts his nose in there. Pretty decent range, obviously a good athlete, and it shows. So he is very interesting to me as somebody that will more than likely be I would say, middle to late day 2 pick. Again, maybe he goes higher because of the combine, and maybe he interviewed really well. But I think a middle to late day 2 pick, maybe an early day 3 guy, I could certainly see the 3rd round. And that's why I say middle to late day 2. But I think a team is going to take him. Maybe I hate throwing it out there. Maybe he's Blake Cashman, that what we wanted Blake Cashman to be when he came out of Minnesota, when he got drafted to the Jets. But Cashman was a 5th round pick, and he had, I think a relatively good combine, if I remember. So I don't know. I think Cashman was a little bit undersized. Anderson's got a really good size for the position, if I remember. It's like 6'1", 240, 235. So he moves well. He's got good size. We'll see.
Okay. Let's keep on rolling. And this, comment here again from I believe from Pops here, just talking about the tight end class. Is the tight end class deeper than usual? What are your feelings on the tight end class? And I actually had a question for you regarding tight ends. We've talked a little bit about them. We actually were live on air when the the combine was happening, which was kind of fun. We got to kind of we were watching wide receivers, but earlier that day we watched some of the tight end stuff. So Trey McBride, Greg Dulcich, Isaiah Likely, Jelani Woods had as a freak athlete. So talk a little bit about Trey McBride. Where do you think he will go? I would love him in brown and orange, just because of the offense that they use. They obviously didn't bring Hooper back. They have David Njoku. They love to run the 2 tight end sets. He's a solid, from a size perspective, in my opinion, great pass catcher. I think he would fit really nice. I don't know that I want to spend pick 44 on him, though. Do you think he'd fall to the 3rd round, or is he going to be gone by the time the 3rd round comes around?
McBride will be gone. I think if there's any, the consensus is that there's no tight end worthy of being a 1st round pick. I think it is a deep tight end group. I only have 6 graded and fully watched, but I know there's people that really like Cade Otton out of Washington. I didn't get a chance to watch him. I believe he was injured too, so I didn't get a chance to watch him. But you look at Jelani Woods, 2 games of him. He was very intriguing because of just his size and his catch radius. He obviously tests off the charts. He's obviously going to be a big riser. I would be surprised if he went, beyond the 3rd round. If he didn't go before that, I would be, I think that's more than likely going to happen with him. But there's also really good balanced tight ends, guys that, and it was brought up in the Cover One chat today of how balanced guys are, like Charlie Kohler, and one elite thing. But Ruckert's maybe one of the best blocking tight ends in this class, and maybe one of the more consistent and overall good blended tight ends in this class. beyond that, with Trey McBride, I think he's the closest one that makes the most sense for maybe the first round in the back end. Maybe a team like the Jets trade up to get him to make sure that Jacksonville doesn't take him at 33. Maybe a team like Buffalo does fall in love with him at 25. They've done a lot of research on these tight ends. So is there a reason behind that? Are they doing that because they want to push other players down the board so somebody moves up to get one? I don't know. I think Green Bay is very intriguing at 28. But I've said this: if Brandon Pettigrew can go in round one, I think Trey McBride is worthy of going in round one. And I like what I like what he possesses as far as his overall blocking ability. He's not phenomenal at it, but he's a willing blocker. I think his catching skills are there. I think he moves really well after the catch, and I think just what he does in the short and intermediate areas of the field is what makes him so intriguing to me. And I think if you can get him in and it's always this case, we get a guy in the right spot, the right scheme, it's perfect. I think if you can get him in the right place, I think Travis Kelce like type player. I think maybe you don't get that much production, but I think he moves relatively similar to Kelce, despite maybe not being the same size. So I like Trey McBride a lot. But again, I'm not opposed to Greg Dulcich out of UCLA. Love his vertical ability. Love how he runs after the catch. So I think he's, a top 50, top 55 type player. But yeah, I mean, I feel like that's damn near every tight end I've watched. So yeah, I like the group. I think it's relatively deep. I think there's a lot of good value between rounds 2 through 4.
And Isaiah Likely, round 2, same thing, somewhere between 2 and 4, probably round 3.
Yeah, I think I gave him a 3rd round grade. He was my 3rd ranked tight end. He reminds me a lot of Gerald Everett in a sense, but maybe not as fast up the seam like Gerald Everett is. He didn't test great by any means, and I know that's got a lot of people worried. We'll see how it shakes out for him, but obviously taking a top 30 visit with the Buffalo Bills and a couple of other teams, that's important. That's something to really consider. Maybe it's not necessarily somebody that you take in the first round, but maybe in that top 50 range, he could go. So 2nd round, it's very possible just because of how he looks on tape. But I think some teams might have some concerns just overall of how he tested.
All right, let's transition over to edge a little bit. There's a couple guys that I feel like you really liked at edge. One was Arnold Ebiketie out of Penn State. I believe he was your 18th overall ranked player. He's usually a little lower in the rankings. So maybe talk a little bit about him because, if that's a guy that you really like, why do you like him, so much? And, if he's a guy that can fall into the 2nd round, but in your opinion has a 1st round grade, I mean, that I think is something that, a team like the Browns may be looking at it at 44 or any of those teams above them that may have an edge need. What are your thoughts? Why do you like him? Maybe one of the draft pundits out there.
Yeah, well, Ebiketie is, obviously, I'm like you mentioned to start the show, my board's a little bit different than the consensus, and it's kind of always been that way. A few years back, I had Charles Omenu as a top 20 player. Maybe he's not necessarily been that type of guy, but I see value in guys a different way, and I view it from how I would coach the position or coach a player and coach a team, and that's just how I've always been. And Ebiketie's kind of the same way, and I don't view it from a groupthink mentality. I don't look at, well, this guy blew up the combine, so he's an automatic top 10 player, and he's got to be top 10 on my board to prove me correct. No, it doesn't always work like that because not all top 10 players pan out. And yeah, I'm talking about Trayvon Walker, who is behind Arnold Ebiketie on my edge rankings, and I don't care about that stuff. I really don't. Like in Ebiketie, when you watch him play, he can take over a game off the edge, despite maybe only being 6'2" and 7/8 or 6'3" and 255. He can turn the corner. He can translate speed to power. He's got the length. He's got really long arms, and that goes a long way when you talk about a guy that can turn the corner. And his bend, his ability to turn is, I don't want to say some of the fastest we see in the class, but it's quick. He moves really well, and he does a great job. So I love his skill set quite a bit. I think, if he can get a touch faster off the line of scrimmage, he will truly take his game to the next level. And I know the pro comparison for him has been Shaq Barrett. So maybe that's the type of player he gets to be. Maybe it's 14, 15 sacks, and it's comparable to Shaq.
And from a landing spot perspective, maybe just trying to think about the second mock draft you did. So let's say some of the top teams in the top of the second round, Jags end up getting Aiden Hutchinson. Your Lions take Kayvon. Even the Jets, they go get Jermaine Johnson. So let's say that those guys, 33, 34, 35, 38, aren't really in the game as far as an edge goes. Where do you think maybe is a potential landing spot for him in the second round that maybe makes sense, or a team that maybe is kicking the tires on him a little bit?
Well, I certainly think a landing spot like 35 or 38 of the Jets make a lot of sense if they pass on an edge rusher in the first round. Like, hypothetically speaking, who's to say that they don't go, Jameson Williams and Trevor Penning? And who's to say that they don't go Sauce Gardner and Trevor Penning? I know they've done a lot of research on Penning. I know they like Sauce Gardner. I know they like Jameson Williams. So I think there's a chance that they go that route. I know they also like Jermaine Johnson. So I think that's kind of the four players that make a lot of sense for them. But again, is that because they don't believe Kayvon's going to be there? If Kayvon's there, is that their guy? Is Trayvon Walker intriguing for Robert Saleh at 4? So when you look at the Jets, there's a lot of different options for them. But if they pass on edge rusher completely in the first round, I think Ebiketie, if he's there at 35, makes a lot of sense. But if he's not there, why is he not there? Is it a team like Pittsburgh at 20 is a wild card team to pair him up to play opposite of TJ Watt? I think that's a very strong possibility. I think New England at 21, I compared him to Matthew Judon, who they currently have, but I think there's a chance that maybe they consider pairing him up with, putting them opposite of each other. And that's their edge rusher scheme. That's what they go with. I think Dallas is very intriguing. They just lost Randy Gregory. I think Ebiketie would be a great fit there. So I think that there's quite a few different spots. And lastly, Kansas City, back-to-back picks. If they don't take Boy Mafia, if they don't like that fit and they like Arnold Ebiketie a little bit better, I think that would be a great spot for him.
I gotta look at the chat here, and punters never get any love. So, I know, in your draft guide, you had Matt, you did break his film down like your top 120 players. But, I think you mentioned in your draft guide, he was going to go in the 4th to 5th round, punter out of San Diego State. Obviously he's a lot to like about him. So is that, 4th, 5th round, what's your thoughts on him just briefly? Since we don't get to talk, we got to give punters some love, right? We don't get to talk about the punters ever.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. He was somebody that I just kind of watched clips and highlights of. I didn't watch a full-on game and wait for 4th down to see how he punted the football to make sure that toe was always pointed down. But he can absolutely boot it. And from some of my contacts through the Shrine Bowl, he had a really good week. He talked to quite a few different teams, and teams were really enamored by him. So I think, there's a chance he could go in the 3rd round just simply because of the value he brings to be able to flip the field. I circle a team like the Rams, a team that I don't want to say they don't have a bunch of holes, but they don't have their punter back from last year. Johnny Hecker's gone. So I think that could be the natural fit for them because, as they say, F them picks, right? Like that's kind of who they are. So I think Ariza would be a fine fit there. And I mean, could Buffalo do it? Sure. But I would be, if I could put a bet on a punter to a team for the first time ever in my life, I would go Matt Ariza to the Rams.
All right. Well, hey, I just had to get some punter love out there for the special teamers that don't get a lot of love in the NFL draft shows. But I mean, hey, people call them punt gods. So I mean, that's kind of cool in itself. That's kind of cool in itself right there. So, another edge guy, kind of sticking with edge for a minute, David Ojabo out of Michigan. You have a round 1 grade on him. Obviously the torn Achilles, really a bummer, for him. I was reading some things recently that, maybe the Cowboys are kind of looking at him if he falls a little bit. But, how far do you think he will fall because of that injury? And, is he, it's hard to, I'm sure neither of us are doctors, right? But what kind of chance does he have to make any sort of impact in this year, in your opinion? Or is it kind of everyone heals, in my opinion, differently from an Achilles. So, can he maybe make impact this year? I don't know. I guess, what are your thoughts on him? Where do you think he ends up? How far does he fall because of that injury?
Well, it certainly depends on where he ends up going. If he goes to a bad football team that maybe has a long rebuild in front of them, if they're kind of out of the playoff picture in nine, after 9 or 10 weeks in the regular season, then I think obviously he would be probably out of the mix for a team like that. But when you look at a team like Baltimore at 45 in the second round, I think that's a phenomenal fit for him. His former defensive coordinator at Michigan is now there. John Harbaugh, obviously brothers with Jim Harbaugh. I would assume that they were there. He was probably there at the Michigan Pro Day, and odds are, they probably have a little bit better inside information of the injury compared to other teams. So I think Baltimore is really intriguing at 45. But yeah, he would be a first-round player. We would be talking about him in the top 15, I think, certainly, because of how comparable he is to Chandler Jones, the upside to him, as we always talk about upside with edge rushers. I think with Ajabo, there's certainly a lot to like with him. You mentioned the Cowboys. I could see them doing that. I could also see them, maybe passing it on to a team like Kansas City, who might consider him because they have 2 first-rounders and they do have some draft capital and they don't have a ton of needs. So maybe they pass that on to a team like Kansas City, not on purpose, but, they go another route because it's safer. And Ajabo, I think he could impact, again, like I said, probably after 9 or 10 weeks into the regular season. You're talking 2 months of the regular season. By the time we start the year, it's basically 4 months after the injury. We've seen guys come back on torn Achilles after about 6 or 7 months. So I think there's a chance there that we could see him near the end and push for the playoffs.
All right. So, this is an interesting question. I know that we're usually talking about NFL draft, but we can always talk about just NFL news in general. And I actually had I wanted to get your thoughts on a couple situations. We'll pivot here for a second just because our friend Jason brought up Lamar Jackson in a contract situation. So kind of want to talk about that as well as maybe the situation going on right now with Kyler Murray in Arizona and some of the, some of the problems, some of the issues going on between Kyler and that team out there in the desert. So first and foremost, Lamar not wanting his extension this year. I don't personally, and this is no inside info or anything, I don't personally know that I agree that he doesn't want it this year. I don't know that Baltimore wants to give him a contract this year. And I think the Browns kind of screwed everybody over by giving Deshaun Watson a fully guaranteed $230 million or whatever that contract was. So, right now the Ravens owner actually came up publicly and was, obviously against that. Shocking, right? For his own selfish reasons there, because I'm sure he doesn't want to guarantee a huge contract like that to Lamar. So what's your thoughts on that comment on Lamar? And then maybe let's pivot a little bit and get your thoughts on maybe that situation out in Arizona, because those are 2 high profile quarterbacks that, maybe a little, just a little disheveled going into this season.
Right. Yeah. I mean, starting with Lamar, I'm with you. I would be surprised if he didn't want that extension. Why would you risk playing a full season, not having your contract extension, knowing that as physical as it is for him back there because of how mobile he is, why would you risk taking the chance of not getting paid now when you might not get paid tomorrow? So I think that's the case with him. I think he probably wants an extension, but he just doesn't seem like that guy that's like, it's all about him. He seems to have kind of his head on his shoulders and kind of keeps it humble. Maybe I'm wrong in that regard, but I don't think I am. I think he is a relatively humble guy that he does appreciate, his teammates. He does appreciate the organization for taking him in the first round. But also when you look at the Ravens, I mean, this is why you take a guy in the first round at the quarterback position, because you do get that 5th-year option. Now, if he didn't have him in the first round, they took him at, let's say, 33 rather than 32, we'd be talking about an extension right now, because I think that they would have probably locked him up because of, one, where they're picking in the draft and because of the uncertainty in this draft. Now, maybe that's why there's this hesitation, because they want to see what, CJ Stroud does, what Bryce Young does, what can they do to maybe get themselves in position for one of those guys next year. Not saying that they're all in on one of those guys, but just saying maybe they're waiting to view how it looks next year, because they feel maybe a little bit better about next year's class of quarterbacks compared to this year's. I think that's very much a possibility. Again, they're picking 14th, so they are kind of in that Kenny Pickett, Desmond Ridder, Malik Willis type of world. But at some point, I think they're going to just probably extend Lamar. I know a lot of people don't like Lamar, but I think they're probably going to end up extending him because, I mean, he did win MVP. The worst thing you don't want to give up on this guy now and then him go somewhere else and win a Super Bowl and win 2 or 3 more MVPs and take the league over, especially because you're probably not going to trade him within the AFC. You're probably going to send him to the NFC. So if that's what you end up doing, I think you end up kind of shooting yourselves in the foot. And then as far as Kyler Murray, I don't understand what he's trying to do. I really don't. If you got a contract offer, an extension, get it. And don't make things all about you. And it's just, I mean, and that kind of feel like what Kyler Murray has been, right? Like whether it was about the baseball stuff, whether it was about, from the Heisman to the baseball stuff, the first overall pick. It's always, that's why I had such hesitation about him. Like, he's a good quarterback, but he's not at the same level as some of these other guys. He just isn't. Very mobile, has a big arm at times, but you look at what this team does late in the year, they don't win football games. He stops winning. His head coach, Cliff, stops winning. They fall apart. And I think that's going to continue as Matthew Stafford's with the Rams. And sure, the Seahawks might take a step back, but who knows? If they take Malik or Desmond Ridder at 9, who's to say they missed a step? They might not. So, Kyler, I think it's more so him just trying to get as much money as possible, specifically, I think, guaranteed money. And I think when you look at it from his perspective of, I could have been in the major league, I could have been in Major League Baseball, and I'm not saying he would have had a guaranteed contract by now, but yeah, at some point he's probably looking at if it would have panned out for him in MLB, he could have very well had a $145 million contract, all guaranteed, because, baseball players get paid that amount of money. I'm not saying he was going to get that, but there's a chance. So I think he's just trying to get as much guaranteed money as he possibly can. And I can't fault him for that.
Yeah. And it's, I agree. Both situations are interesting. And obviously, I think the contracts are going to continue to get, it's going to, the whole Deshaun Watson contract, I think, is going to really change the landscape a little bit in the NFL. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Another question that we have out there in the chat, what are your thoughts on defensive end Cameron Thomas? I don't think you had the ability to watch a ton of his tape. I know he is in your draft guide at the end, but what are your thoughts on Cam?
Great size, great power for the position. I think when you think of, maybe George Karlaftis, like a poor man's Karlaftis in this year's draft, maybe a poor man's J.J. Watt in a sense in this draft, I think you think Cameron Thomas. He had a ton of coverage sacks at San Diego State, and that was what really jumped out to me. Great effort. I love that type of effort. That's my type of player. But other than that, I mean, I didn't see really a full-on pass rush plan. I didn't see the quick hands and the swim moves and the swipe moves like I do with Ebiketie and some of these other guys. So I think with Cameron Thomas, as interesting as he is, I don't see the first round, second round hype with him. I could see third or fourth round for sure. But that again, that's just me. And that was off of, 2 games or a game and a half, 2 games, whatever it was, watching him. So I didn't get a full-on grade on him like everybody else. But, I mean, after I saw 2, I was like, I can't fall in love with this like everybody else.
Okay. And there's, another player, and obviously if you're still in the chat, loving all the comments, loving the questions, keep them coming. Obviously, we have Air Raid Hour coming up here at 9:00 on the Cover One Network. We usually try to get out of here a little bit early so they can get ready to go. But we'll continue to stay on with you as long as you guys have questions about round 2. Another question I had for you, though, there was a player that I feel you maybe have ranked a little bit lower. Quay Walker, linebacker out of Georgia. I believe you have him in the 70s in your draft guide. And, again, some other draft pundits maybe have him up as high as 40. So just curious on your take on Walker out of Georgia. Maybe what weaknesses of his kind of stood out for you that, maybe dropped him down your board a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I watched 4 games of him, and I liked what I saw. I really did. I saw a great length, size for the position at 6'4", 241. I like that because I think you can play him inside, you can play him outside, maybe even a little bit off the edge because of his athletic ability. I thought as a coverage linebacker, he did a really good job, especially with that length. So I don't think he'll have a lot of issues with running backs and tight ends. But at the same time, does that slow him up at all against NFL draft NFL talent? Does that slow him down? Because kind of the taller you are, longer you are, the longer your strides get. So will that be a problem, on those angle routes, on those swing patterns? Is he going to be fast enough to get on his horse and get out there to screen passes and things like that? Because he does have to get stronger. He has to take on blocks better. He has to make all of that happen. And if he doesn't, stiff hips while scraping is always a concern with me. And when you play 52 career games and I don't see that complete player, I think if you're giving him first round buzz or second round buzz, it's more so off of maybe potential. And I'm fine with that. But he played 52 games. Not saying he is who he is, but at some point when I look at that, I say he might be he is who he is at this point. Now, a fairly decent basketball player back in high school, averaged almost 6 points per game, almost 7 rebounds per game. He actually initially committed to Alabama, flipped to Georgia. I like his skill set. I think he could very well be somebody that falls into that second round range, just because, again, you're betting on traits, just like Trayvon Walker. But at the same time, I personally don't see it, and that's just me. Third round grade, I'm happy with it. I could see it, though. So that's just where I am.
Okay. And just, continuing right along here, Tim had a question on the Washington cornerbacks. I know we've talked quite a bit about McBride, but there's also some chatter about Kyler Gordon. I know you did have the ability to watch some tape on Kyler. So maybe, if you want to touch on McBride slightly, but I know we've talked about him quite a bit on the shows in the past. I think everyone is, likes him. We have a, first round. Well, you have a first round grade on him. I think, again, Anthony in our mock draft took him in the first round. So maybe touch on him slightly, but then transition more into, Kyler Gordon, because we haven't touched on Kyler yet. So I think that'd be an interesting player to talk about.
Yeah, well, McBride's 38th on the board for me. Close to the first round as far as overall grading, but, a high second round pick, former baseball player, crushed it, batted .452 back in high school. Was basically a walking double on the basketball court. He's somebody that I think as an athlete, you just see the natural athletic ability with him. I really like him. As we talk about McBride, I like him in the short and intermediate areas of the field. I think design screens are really good. And then for the Washington guys, I like Trent McDuffie quite a bit. Did you ask me about Trey McBride at all, or did I just completely go?
No, the question was, the Washington cornerback. So, I think Kyler Gordon is somebody I think we haven't talked about a ton on the show.
And then you said Trent McDuffie. I swear to God, you said Trey McBride.
I might have said, you know what? I could have. It's possible, but I totally meant McDuffie. I think I still have Trey McBride in my brain because I want him for the Browns so bad at tight end. But no, I obviously meant the cornerback out of Washington, Trey McDuffie. So I apologize if Trey McBride came out of my mouth. It's we're gonna blame the Jefferson Ocean bourbon this evening.
All right, well, my fault. So, yeah, McBride, very close to the first round. I could see him going in the first round. Former track and field star back in high school, ran the 100-meter dash in 10.82 seconds. He's my third-ranked corner. Shorter arms kind of hurts him a little bit. It's going to create issues against taller receivers. I think he plays a little too eager at times in, zone coverage. He's kind of in his spots and in his drops, and he just gets a little excited, and that's fine. I think you just got to get a little bit more patient, but you see the athletic ability from him where he's just able to run in stride with these players, and I love his skill set. I think when you see him going across the field on crossers, it's so important. So he might be a little bit more of a slot because of the shorter arms. We'll see. But I like how physical he is. I mean, he was locked down. He only allowed 16 catches this past year, and the closing speed really stands out. So McDuffie, very much in the first round conversation for probably plenty of teams. The Eagles come to mind. The Bills come to mind. Arizona certainly comes to mind if they want to revamp that defense a little bit, which they should. And then, next, Kyler Gordon. I like Kyler Gordon as a top 50 player. I might be on my own there. I might be kind of in an island because he didn't test great at the combine. He didn't test bad, but he didn't test great. I see the athletic ability from him. I think he is certainly somebody that can play too fast at times, and that's concerning to me because it gets him out of position and it forces passes his way. But fortunately for Fortunately for him and his defense, and unfortunately for the opposition, he makes great tackles. He's very consistent in that department. He's got the ball skills, I think, to win at the catch point. He's physical through the catch point as well. So I like both of these guys as top 50 picks. And when you look at a passing offense in the NFL today, as the passing league that we see with offenses, I think they both make sense because of just how aggressive they are and how consistent they are from tackling, the range, and the things that you see on tape.
Yeah, I think cornerback position is definitely an important one. I know Bills Mafia is always excited to talk about cornerbacks. I personally think that's the number one thing that they should go out and try to get, whether it's round 2, round 1, heck, round 3. They have the offensive firepower. The team is, I don't know. I mean, for those of you that just tuning in, I'm a Browns fan, but obviously, on Cover 1, I've become kind of an adopted Bills fan. I've gone to Bills backers bars here in Cleveland for games last year with Greg Thompson. Great team. Honestly, I'm jealous of Josh Allen. Wish we would have drafted him at this point over Baker Mayfield. I was definitely wrong on that one. But, looking at that team, definitely cornerback is something that I feel if they can lock down that secondary at the cornerback position, running back too, but they can get that cornerback settled, that they're going to be in great shape. Another great question in the chat from our boy Pops again. I like this one. Can you compare Phyllis Jones versus Calvin Austin? I think you have them graded fairly closely as far as your draft guide goes. If I'm looking at this correctly, I believe you have Jones at 91 and Austin at 94. So very close. But maybe if you could compare and contrast the two from a skill set position and where you think they may go in the draft, round 2, 3, what were you thinking there?
Yeah, it's so close with those two. The only thing that really hurts Calvin Austin is his overall size. I compared him to Tariq Cohen. I think he could be comparable in that regard because I think he'll be used similarly at the next level, a little bit out of the backfield, probably catching a lot of swing passes, maybe those jet passes that we see. I think he's going to be – oh, yeah, I was way off on Josh Allen. No question about it. But, yeah, with Calvin Austin, he's just a little bit undersized, and, it's going to work for him, but if he's not Tariq Cohen out of the backfield, is he more Taylor Gabriel, something like that? I think that's also a good comparison for him. It works, but it doesn't work as like a true number 1 receiver. Not saying Velus Jones is, but I think Velus Jones is probably a little bit closer to being a number 2 receiver because 1, he's got a ton of experience, super smart guy. Not saying Calvin is not smart, but Velus Jones is working on a master's degree, and I think from a route running perspective, I thought Velus really stood out at the Senior Bowl in those one-on-one situations. They both did a really good job, but Velus Jones seems to just be so consistent in that area. And he's somebody that I know age is going to scare people, but I'm going to take that guy that's kind of got his head on his shoulders. He's going to come in, do the 9 to 5 for me. I'm not, if I'm picking in that 90 range, I'm not looking for, that true number 1 receiver. If I was going to do that, I would have drafted Chris Olave at 15 or something. But if I'm there, if I can get somebody that can create separation and win against, the worst cornerback on the opposition, I'm going to take that guy. Calvin Austin, though, on the contrary, I don't want to say scheme dependent, but more so of that gadget player. And not all of these gadget players work in the NFL, but I do like both players. Calvin Austin, legit track speed. Again, Tariq Cohen type of player, I think, can happen. And I don't remember where Matt Nagy went after being let go by the Bears. Maybe he didn't go anywhere. But if Calvin Austin ends up in a team like Kansas City, Jesus Christ. Forget about it. Sorry, but oh my.
Yeah, no, and obviously, they have a void to fill now with some of that need with, Tyreek Hill moving on. So another question, I know we've talked a little bit about Roger Mccreery before, but not today. So Asa has a question on what are your thoughts on Roger Mccreery? I know from a draft guide standpoint, you have a second round grade on him, I believe 5 or 6 from a position rank standpoint. So what's your thoughts on Roger? I think he maybe a potential target for the Bills at 57. I think he could be around, in my opinion, there. So what do you think about Roger?
Yeah, he's a 46th on the board, 6th overall, corner on my board, very experienced player. has 42 games played, very fluid athlete. His hips, I mean, what's the Shakira song, Hips Don't Lie? That's certainly him. I mean, he is really, really good with his lower body, quick feet, closes well. And I love how aggressive he is through the catch point. It really stands out to me. And it stood out at the Senior Bowl. I mean, not saying he was the best cornerback down there, but I think might have been the most consistent corner down at the Senior Bowl. So I think that's going to go a long way. At one point, he was considered a first rounder. I think that's still the case, especially with Kansas City with two first-round picks. I like that fit for him a lot. So if, Kansas City was able to get Arnold Ebiketie or Boy Mafe and Roger Mccreery in the first round, I think that'd make a lot of sense. But I think as a top 50 pick, Mccreery, I think he goes. I really do. Maybe he's there at that 57 to 62 type range, but overall, I really like Mccreery. I think he's physical enough to play on the outside, but he's certainly fast enough to play in the slot, and the shorter arms is probably going to scare some people and maybe some teams. But at the end of the day, like, you watch the tape and the guy just balls, man. He just balls up.
All right. So a lot of great questions tonight, in the chat. Really appreciate all of that. Russell, obviously we've talked about quite a few of actually the prospects that I wanted to touch on. I'll ask one more, and then I want you to maybe just, if there was a prospect that might be in the second round that we haven't talked about that you really, you maybe really liked or we haven't just discussed yet that you kind of have a passion about. But I'll take that back. There's two quarterbacks we haven't talked a ton about recently: Sam Howell, Matt Corral. There's some buzz about, Corral maybe going in the first round now. It's kind of, it's a little bit intriguing there as I do this weird neck thing. I just noticed, kind of strange on YouTube. Again, I'm going to blame the bourbon, but maybe you talk a little bit about Sam and Matt, and, let's say your Lions don't go Malik Willis at 2 and they take, Hutchinson at 2. Is that, they take a safety or something at 32? Is that in play at the top of the second round? What are your thoughts on Sam Howell? What are your thoughts on Matt Corral? Where do you think they may ultimately end up?
Yeah, I mean, we'll call it what it is at this point. The top 5 consensus quarterbacks, however you want to rank them, from Desmond Ridder, Matt Corral, Sam Howell, Kenny Pickett, and Malik Willis. All 5 of these guys are going in the top 50. So whether people like that or not, they're going. Just it's a matter of when they're going and where they're going, right? But with Matt Corral, he's interesting, and I'll start there. He's the lower ranked of the 5. He's 54th on the board. He's my 5th quarterback. I was very much at one point looking at Matt Corral and saying, hey, this guy I think has QB1 potential, and I still feel that way. At 6'2", 205, the mobility from him is really impressive. I love his skill set. I think the RPO zone read concepts that he did at Ole Miss, he was a technician in that regard. We talk about players like Luke Godeke from Central Michigan. Guy's a technician at right tackle. I think Matt Corral did a really good job with his overall technique, but at the same time, running that offense efficiently, I should say. But overall, at times his technique can get a little crazy. He, I don't want to say throws like off platform, but his base isn't consistent enough. He doesn't stay square. He kind of throws off base. He's throwing it a mile down the field and not going through his reads, and that hurts him. While it's a one read offense, it's hurting him developing as he goes through his progressions. So that worries me with him, and that's why he ended up at 54. But I also think he has to add weight to his frame. I mean, 205 is just far too thin in the NFL to be mobile and take the hits that he's going to take. He's got to find ways to put some mass to his frame. I think that the decision-making got a hell of a lot better with him in 2021 than it was in 2020. Against Arkansas, he had 6 picks in 2020. This past year, I think he had maybe a total of 7 or 8 picks, if I remember correctly. So the decision-making got better, but ultimately, you got to show that the decision-making is consistent. You have to show that you can get through more than one read, and you have to show that you can take the hits that the NFL is going to bring you. I can see why teams are enamored by him. I really can. In today's offenses, I can see it. But I don't know. Is he going to go in the first round? He's invited. We'll see. He accepted. He accepted the invite, and I think he accepted it because Kenny Pickett and Desmond Ridder declined it. But again, we'll see. And as for Sam Howell, I like him a lot. I mean, his arm is huge. He can throw it deep down the field better than just about anybody, maybe outside of Malik Willis. I think the biggest thing with him, I mean, I love how he scans the field, but he just plays with a lot of hesitation. And he regressed from 2020 to 2021. And I think the issue is that he did, he lost 4 playmakers in his offense in the 2021 NFL draft. He is somebody that I think ball placement deep down the field is very spotty. I think he takes some unnecessary shots down the field, similar to Mccreery. So that worries me. When I watch Willis and Pickett and Ritter, I see a little bit more consistency there. But I will say, I could see Sam Howell being a fit for Tampa Bay. I could see Mccreery being a fit for Tampa Bay in the back end there. And again, Detroit, you mentioned them. If they pass on the QB, I could see it happening there. And if Atlanta passes on a QB at 8, I could see them taking one at 43. And I could see a team trading up in the first round to get a quarterback. So let's say Atlanta passes on a QB at 8 altogether because Kyle Hamilton or Kayvon Thibodeau are there, or a wide receiver like a Garrett Wilson or a Jameson Williams. If they take one of those guys, I could see them trading back up into the first round and taking Mccreery 100%. So I think there's a lot of different options in this draft and a lot of different scenarios. But that's just how I view those QBs. I like them. I just don't love them, but I'm accepting that they're going to be top 50 picks.
Yeah, no, I'm very intrigued by both of them and where they're going to go. I do want to get to just a couple more. In my opinion, we have some nice comments. I just want to try to get them really quickly. Elshar came back, and I agree. This is a good question. What do you think is the better value, Booth at 25 or Mccreery at 57? So maybe try to grab that one in 30 seconds or less, and then we'll move on to a couple more before we get out of here tonight.
Booth at 25, Mccreery at 57. I did see a comment that my stuff's freezing up. I'm kind of thinking that's been the case tonight. I
think audio-wise you've been fine, though, but it's okay on the video. We're not good-looking guys, anyways. It's fine. Okay. Nobody wants to look at our faces.
Yeah. Yep. That's why I do. That's why I do radio. Booth at 25, Mccreery at 57. Man, I would say Mccreery at 57, if I'm going to be honest. I mean, I could see why you take Booth at 25. I really could. I mean, at one point, I think a lot of people said, he's a top 15 pick, top 20 player. I could see it. I could make that case. But when I look at Mccreery, man, I see so much fluidity with his lower body. I see a guy that's just as aggressive through the catch point. And if you can get that guy at 57 and still add I don't think, Jameson Williams is not going to be there at 25, but if you can add a receiver or even a running back there at 25, man, in the way that they've done it in the past, they've doubled down. So is it Booth at 25 and Mccreery at 57? It's possible. It's very much in the cards. And I don't think that'd be a bad draft. I really don't.
Couple more quick ones. Jameson Williams, originally you had him mocked to the Bills at 25. We have a question here. Actually, we had a couple comments. One, the Chiefs are having Williams in for a visit. They must have something planned. And then Timothy with another, good comment. How far do you think he falls? Not to 27, right? And originally we had him potentially going to 25 in our mock. That was just our an early mock from you. So I guess where do you think he may fall in? The Chiefs do have a couple picks. Do you think maybe they use some of that capital, and they hop up a couple picks, maybe ahead of the Bills at 25 or ahead of maybe the Patriots or something like that, and, try to grab him a little earlier if he's fallen?
Well, I'll be honest. One thing that was passed to me today, Jameson Williams at 4 to the Jets.
Oh, good Lord.
I think that would be... I would be quite surprised at that if that was the case. Because
our show is basically over, and because you just said that, I gotta pour a little bit more. Just because you said that, the Jet 4, I'm pouring a little bit more, and our show's almost over. I don't care. 4.
Yeah. That was kind of some things that were talked to me today, but yeah. I know the Jets really like sauce, but we'll see on that. But Atlanta, I think, is a really ideal landing spot. I would be surprised if the Giants did it. I think Atlanta at 8. I don't think the Seahawks will do it at 9. The Jets at 10 make a lot of sense for Jameson again. But if he's gone, or maybe they're a little bit hesitant about, and again, maybe this is why they've mentioned Jameson Williams at 4. So maybe a team like the Kansas City Chiefs, who have 28 and 29, or excuse me, 29 and 30, do they put those two picks together and move all the way up to 10 and take Jamison Williams? And the Jets, who maybe they get Sauce Gardner at 4, and at 29, they take Arnold Ebiketie or Boy Mafi, and at 30, they take, Traylon Burks if he's there, or maybe it's Christian Watson, or maybe it's George Pickens. I think that those are all very logical options for the New York Jets, and then they get future draft capital. So I think there's a chance with him where, top 15. If I could look at his draft position on a site, if it's let's say 17 and a half, it's under. I'm going to just say this now. That's under. 15, I would probably still say under. I think he's I think he's probably going to be one of the first 2 receivers off the board.
Man, I don't know. I'm excited. I mean, we've talked draft now for 9 straight weeks, and I know you live it every day, and I'm just getting excited to see how this pans out. And as a Browns fan, I don't even pick in the first round. I'm still excited.
You might. You never know.
Yeah, you never know. I do really like Andrew Berry. From a front office perspective, I do think, Haslam meddles a little bit too much, but I think they actually have a solid front office for the first time in a long time. So, really curious to see what they do in the draft. But I just love talking draft. It's awesome. Yeah. So again, we're going to have to get out of here. Thanks for the comments though in the chat. There is a couple questions though, and this is a good one. Do you grade teams after the draft? And Russell says no, but I do think we should probably have a show the week after the draft and kind of maybe do a recap on our thoughts.
Yeah, I think it'd be a great idea. I don't do the letter grade thing. I can't determine on how well all these players are going to fit on a specific scheme or whatever, or a specific team. I'll let the preseason and the regular season in the next 3 to 4 years play out before we can really give that grade. Because I think we do those players such a disservice. One, throughout the entire process, kind of nitpicking them apart and then saying, oh, well, shame on that team for drafting that player to accomplish that kid's dream. I mean, I think it's a very shitty thing to do.
And, I can do that if you want, Tim. I can certainly grade teams after, I've actually behaved myself tonight. I've only really drank 1 glass of bourbon on previous shows. I've done worse damage. But last week we only had water, and we had a lot of technical issues. So that's why I went back to the bourbon, and we did a lot better tonight from that standpoint. But again, really appreciate all the comments. I think we're definitely going to have a show after the draft. We're going to have one more next week. So we'll have to figure out what we're going to do next week. Maybe another live mock. We'll talk about it. We'll send out some tweets on what we're going to do. Maybe get another guest on next week to kind of go through some live, maybe some live mocks deeper than the first round. Maybe we'll start in the second round and do a live mock or something. That could be kind of fun. And, obviously I'll, recap anything that happens between now and next week and talk about all of that. And then, NFL draft will be here, and then we'll do a kind of a recap show. I think that'll be a good way to end the NFL draft season for us here at this particular show on Cover One. But again, really appreciate all the chat, especially some of the new folks that I haven't seen before in the chat. Timothy Elishar, and definitely some of the old, people that have been with us since week 1, like Pops Mafia. Jason, you did great in the chat today as well. Shout out to basically everybody. We love the chat. It's awesome interacting outside of Twitter, right? And the 140 characters we're held to from a Twitter perspective. But with that being said, please follow us on Twitter at Burner Sports, at Russ NFL Draft. Download his draft guide. It is awesome. It is free. If you want to donate to charity, even better. Get that karma going for yourself. But Russell, for the people tonight, any parting words for our friends here on the Cover One Network?
No, I appreciate the support. Always fun doing this show. I look forward to it every single Thursday. It's been a lot of fun. If you want to get caught up on previous episodes of mock drafts or scenarios or whatever, check it out on YouTube. Subscribe to the page, or like he said, follow us on Twitter. Smash the follow button and check out the guide. It's free. There's nothing to cost you at all. So enjoy it, and I appreciate all the support.
Love it, Russell. Again, I'm going to finish up your draft guide. That's been awesome to this point from the parts I have read of it. And again, it's a Cover One Nation. Stick around. Air raid is up in 11 minutes. But again, for myself, Rich at Burner Sports, and for Russell Brown at Russ NFL Draft on Twitter, we are out of here. Have a great night, everybody.